How is your business staying one step ahead of cyber criminals? Secure your email, applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, 82% of breaches involve the human element. Yet most security awareness and training programs focus on compliance requirements, not the risk humans pose to your organization. Living Security is the leader in human risk management. This new approach transforms human risk into proactive defense by quantifying human risk. By understanding your riskiest and most vigilant users and activities, you can engage these segments of your workforce with relevant training, communications, and policies to truly change their behaviors. If your goal is to finally change your workforce's behavior, visit securityweekly.com/living security to learn more today. The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance and audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Tyler Robinson. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions often, and we'll get back to you once reviewed. All right, Tyler, let's get into some articles. I pulled in some good ones this week. Yeah,
you did.
Too bad Jason's not here because he would love some of these. This first article is, when I saw this title, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Why CISOs make great board members. We kind of instinctively know this because we know the challenges and some of the gaps on boards when it comes to security and cyber risk concerns. And so why not have CISOs on the board? Like, and whether it's not necessarily your own company board, but having either former CISOs or existing CISOs from other companies sitting on other boards, I think was ultimately what this article is kind of getting to.
Yeah, it's kind of like a no-brainer, like common sense, but then you say it out loud and you're like, yeah, I actually haven't really heard anybody say that. That makes a ton of sense. Why would you not have someone that's evaluated risk, been in the situation that other leaders are in there, and maybe have some war scars that can facilitate not making the same mistakes across some of the other companies and what they've done?
Yeah,
this was a good one, and there's some interesting stuff in there that they've went over as to why they actually qualify a lot of that.
Yeah, and one of the stats in here, 14% of CISOs say they sit on a corporate board or both a board and an advisory committee. So my guess is the actual sitting on a board might be a little lower. But I think it's interesting because, if the SEC guidelines go through where you need to have security expertise, this number should be 100% instead of 14%, right? And so you can see there's still a pretty big gap in order to get there. And then there's some good Gartner stats in here. 40% of customers, or 40% of companies will have a dedicated cybersecurity committee. Will by 2025. So we don't even have a majority of companies that have a dedicated cybersecurity committee yet, right? So there is still a lot of progress that needs to happen in this industry from a board perspective.
Yeah, and that is going to be a problem. I mean, we already have time limitations as leaders in this industry, and especially those of us that are veterans and kind of get committed to a lot of different things. So with the requirement being there, I see that as a huge demand. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be split in time. So I think there's going to be more full-time roles as advisories and opportunities there. But at the same time, that also is going to lend itself to, you're going to have to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and getting good qualified people in there, and not just anybody that maybe has done some security somewhere. You want good advisors that have the experience and are going to give good advice. You can always get bad advice, and there's lots of places to do that. So making sure that you're set up for this in the future is going to be important for companies, because there's going to be a scarcity of good leaders and good advice out there to kind of have on your board. So
yeah, true. Yeah, especially as some of this these set of CISOs start to retire, come out of the industry. Remember, I mean, we're all getting to that point in our careers, at least some of us are, where it's like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I'm going to be doing this too much longer. And as they retire out, you're going to lose some of that expertise, which could be a great retirement job for some of these CISOs as they retire, to go sit on boards and keep their, stay up with the times, but also help other companies through some of these transitions as they need that expertise on the board.
Yeah, I really hope we don't lose some of that industry knowledge as well as institutional knowledge, so that we don't make a lot of those same mistakes. And kind of your next article ties into that, like the next gen CISOs, like what are we looking for the next gen, and what is different, and how do we continue on without making the same mistakes while still kind of adapting and adopting?
Yeah. Well, so perfect segue. And I'm going to channel Jason for a second, because he said it's not about the 10, it's the order of the 10, right? Because number one on the list, which I don't think is the most important, is technical expertise and strategy. We were just talking to Neil Clausen about this from Mimecast. It's the business side of this. It's the business acumen. It's the business risk, which is number two. So not that technical expertise and strategy isn't important. It's just probably a little less important than some of the other ones that are on this list, because when I start getting down into the middle of this article, business acumen, risk management, leadership skills.
I was gonna say number 2 and number 6 are the big ones.
Yes. You have some huge gaps. Lessons learned over the years is, if you understand the business, and the business risks associated with the business, you can be a better leader because you're collaborating with those leaders to come up with the right solutions. Like, if that's like the digest version of what we've learned is, if you're aligned with the business and you're collaborating with those business leaders, you're going to be in a much better position to build the right security programs, regardless of your technical background. Like, those are so important.
And you have a chicken and egg problem, right? If you don't have buy-in, you don't have security culture, you don't have the collaboration, none of the other things, the technical acumen doesn't do anything for you. You can implement it all you want, it's not going to get adopted. So really, I would say 2, 6, and 7, like, you really need the business acumen, the collaboration, security culture, and you have to be able to effectively communicate and articulate these things in order to get that buy-in. And then you can have the technical expertise to kind of build those solutions and get the strategy down.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're never going to innovate if you're not innovating in the right ways for the business. Again, so back to 2, 6,
you're not doing
and
the
7.
basics right either, you're not going to innovate.
Yeah, exactly right. And then, compliance, you can throw that to the bottom as far as I'm concerned. That's just the checkbox anyways. And we talked a little bit about metrics, right? Some of this ties into the risk management stuff we were talking about earlier, is what are the right measurements? What are the right things to track and trend, et cetera? Because as we were talking about in the previous segment, you can't change what you can't measure. Are we measuring the right stuff to effectively change and improve our programs, right? So I would put metrics a little higher on this list, drop some of these other ones down. All in all, though, I think these are great things. I think it's as Jason would say, it's about the order, right? What's the most important?
Yeah, these are things we all know, right? Like, you're right. Jason's order is, we all know what we need to do. It is actually the doing, and the order you're going to do it in is going to make or break you.
Yes, absolutely. And tying into, what was that number 6 on this list? What was the leadership number? Oh no, leadership skills was number 3. Communication was 7. We'll talk communication later, but number 3 is leadership skills. So if you want to sharpen your leadership skills, this next article is for you. This is the top leadership books out there. It's a great list, by the way. A lot of the books in here, we've recommended on the show in the past and on the other podcasts as well. We've talked a lot about these. And again, maybe order matters here a little more. Also, so the first book I ever read on leadership was the first one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I read that a long time ago. It was one of the first leadership books I read. It's one that stuck with me for a long, long time. I encourage people who have not read it. It's a great book. It's helped me with a lot of my organizational skills, the way that's why I'm a writer, right? I use the Covey method in prioritizing stuff, and I still write my notes and do that. And I learned a lot of that from this book in the early days. So I love this one on the list. And then we've covered a ton of these. The Lean Startup, the Leaders Eat Last, which is again one of Jason's favorite books. He talks about this a lot. Good to Great, which we also talk a lot about on this show, is also a really great one.
Yeah, this is a good list.
Yeah.
Almost a fundamental, like you need this list before you can actually lead anybody. You should have read these already.
Yeah. And start with the why. There's a really good, his TED talk on the Golden Circle, Simon Sinek, by the way, is you don't have to read the full book to get the basics of start with the why and why that's important. The Golden Circle TED talk that he gives is a really good starting point before you break into the book on this one. But yeah, why? What's the outcome? What are you trying to achieve? Like, those are really important things for leaders to understand. So that they are building the right strategies and doing the right things for the organization. So, great list of books there. All right. Now let's get a little into the weeds on this one. This Harvard Business Review. When your feelings conflict with your leadership role, I brought this one in because a lot of leaders are going through a hard time right now. Right? I mean, we've seen it in the news, right? There's been large numbers of layoffs across teams, especially in the tech industry, right? A couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of layoffs in the space, right? And you think about the impact that this has to a leader, because it puts a lot of pressure on them and sometimes conflicts with kind of their leadership style. They want to be very transparent, for example, but they can't be because they can't let people know that this is happening. Like, to me, there's been just a lot of pressure on leaders across a lot of organizations with where we are from a macroeconomic standpoint, what's happening with layoffs in the industries and stuff. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a great article to, like, as a leader, where those feelings kind of conflict with your leadership. So, like, how do you reconcile that? Like, it's a hard thing to do, I think, for some people.
Yeah, the dichotomy there between, like, what you actually feel, and especially a lot of us in tech are very logical. So we have a hard time of connecting a lot of the emotional side of this, the empathy, where we're having to put on a face, where logically we understand why we can't say it, why the business is doing things, but we're also very good people. And so we're trying to empathize with our people. We want to really be deep there. So there's some really good tools in here that bring it back and reframe it so you can be real. That deep acting is one that I think I've heard it called different things, but that one, taking it from a surface level act and really reframing the situation so that you are genuinely caring and saying the things that you mean, and then acting and portraying that in the way that you're wanting to, so that people can feel and connect and do that at a meaningful level. Like, those are things that bring meaning to our job. And through these hard times, if you don't have some of those personal deep connections, the understanding of and empathy towards people, that makes it very difficult for you to want to maintain and stay in a role, especially a leadership role, when it gets really tough. So a lot of these provide value back to yourself while providing meaning and things to your team and the people that you're leading. So some of these are really good.
Yeah, and when you look at the last one, it's take time to reconnect and replenish, and I think this is important because it's something I don't think we do enough of. Is taking that downtime, taking time to kind of reflect and think about what happened. Like, your body, your mind especially, right, needs time to kind of get a break and be able to kind of repair itself in some respects, right? And I think we don't take enough time to kind of take this last step of reconnection and replenishing in a high stress job, right? And I think it's important for leaders to be able to do that and be able to kind of recharge a bit, because if they don't, it's going to take a toll on you as a leader, mentally, physically, and it'll come out in a lot of different ways. But stress is not good for us for the long haul as humans. So we need to be able to cope and deal with it.
Yep. Yeah, this was a good article. As a leader, if you're not maintaining mental health, physical health, like you're no good to anybody, dead and or drained. So
Yes.
keep on top of those, because that will make a big difference in your organization long term.
Yep.
And people notice. People aren't dumb.
They definitely notice. Next article is on the federal side. It's interesting because this article puts a focus on the soft skills, right? And we talk a lot about those soft skills on this show. And here they're talking about it from a federal agency perspective, right? And about halfway down the article, I think you get to this interesting statement from the CMS head. He says the challenges cybersecurity professionals face are largely uniform across federal agencies, contractors, and the commercial sector. Interesting. But within government and its myriad complex organizations, soft skills may be particularly important. And if you think about all the political things that are going on, right? And so navigating the politics and all the other things requires more refinement on the soft skills, so you can negotiate and kind of work through that, because these are very large, complex bureaucracies typically in the federal agencies.
You don't say. It is funny that they are putting more emphasis. I mean, these are things that when you interview, and this has been a problem in the government, this has been a very big problem. Like, they're very apt to give you pay, to hire you, to look at your qualifications on paper, because they have very strict regulations on equal opportunity, hiring, all of those things. Yep. The intangibles, the things that actually would bring a lot of value to the government and to the mission space there, those are things that hiring managers, they know it, but in the government bureaucracies they have to operate within, they have no metric or means in order to apply that to your job, to your qualification, to your role for the hiring managers. And this has been a struggle for a long time. The more technical you get too, with really good senior people, high performers, those are the aptitudes that you're really trying to acquire from a talent standpoint. And the government has a hard time qualifying good talent. So this has been a huge issue, and we've been talking to lots of government agencies about how to fix this. And this is the first thing I've seen where they're actually trying to put something behind a system that's already in place to do this. So that's good to see.
Yeah, it looks like they're publishing a framework called The Soft Side of Cyber, which will soon feature a leadership section geared towards CISOs with guidance on budgeting, strategy, hiring, contracting, and other management issues. And
does that make it to the hiring people, though?
That's we'll see. They're trying, I think. So yeah,
A for effort. I'm gonna keep giving them A for efforts.
A for effort. Okay. There you go. As long as you get your zero trust stuff implemented by the end of last year, you're good.
Oh wait. You're already late.
Already late. All right. And in my last communication article for this week is how to get people to listen to you. And
science of people.
Yes, they do such good work. We should try to get Vanessa Van Edwards back on for a follow-up. It's been a couple years since we had her on, and ever since we had her on, I've been tracking their content, and it kind of comes out in chunks. You won't see anything for a while, then they'll post like 3 or 4 of these great articles, and so
that's a 2-hour rabbit hole of reading.
Right. I keep them in my backlog, actually, Tyler. As I'm going through every week and pulling articles, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, they did 3 articles, but I can't cover all 3 articles this week. So I put it in my backlog so we can eventually cover it when I have not enough other good content. And so this one's probably been published for a few weeks because I think it was sitting in my backlog. But there's some great tips in here
about how to get people to listen to you. And I think this is important because we're talking about soft skills and communication. Well, if you're communicating but no one's listening, there's a disconnect, right? And so, a lot of the articles we've been talking about is improving your communication skills. This is one of those things to help you. And it's funny, there's a paragraph in here, and I have to read it because some of these, when you first read it, you're like, wait a minute, no, that's not what you mean. If your listeners cannot hear you, you can work on enunciating clearly. Yes. Speaking louder, not necessarily, because some people think you are yelling. And finding the right pace of speech, which I definitely agree with. The little pause always help to allow the brain to kind of catch up, both on the speaking side and on the listening side. And so this can be hard, especially for introverts or people who have had a hard time speaking in front of groups, but practice makes progress. And again, we're in a pretty technical field. And so sometimes it's hard for people with those skills to be able to get up and have a conversation. So if you want to improve communication, there's some great tips in here. The first one is, tell a story. I love to tell stories. If the story is relevant, it is a great way to connect with your audience to get them to listen because it's intriguing, it's interesting, it that story is meaningful to them, and so that's one I use a lot. Number two, I am horrible at, which is make me laugh. My wife says I am not funny at all, so stop trying to be funny. So this one does not work for me. Anyways, anyone's in here particularly, Tyler, that you thought were interesting?
And there's a lot. So you spend enough time speaking in front of people, it becomes very important to kind of dial this in, and you can continue learning filler words, your articulation, your tones and inflections are very big. This is one I've actually been working on. There's a great YouTube, Vin Gon, I believe. He teaches public speaking, and he has a whole bunch of just 5-minute segments on like how to use your voice to get a message across, because there's a lot of people that are very flat toned, and he talks about just pounding the same key on a piano versus someone playing a beautiful symphony. If you don't let your voice do what it's designed to do, you don't capture the audience, and they tune you out very frequently, especially with as much noise as we have today with all of the social media. So any improvement that you can get around speaking or camera etiquette and really understanding what those things are. So not just when you're on camera or you're speaking in public, but when you're talking to a board member, when you're talking to an individual, making them feel present and paid attention to and heard. There's a lot of subtleties in the nonverbal things that most of us just do naturally, especially filler cues and things like that really diminishes our ability to get a message across, especially when we're very technical. We can be super smart if we're using filler words, or we're not articulating properly and not communicating, or our inflections are off, then we are not communicating effectively, and that takes away from the message that would otherwise be received. So whatever you can do to kind of get through anything that improves your public speaking, your ability to get people to hear you, learning pace, learning all of those different things that are very, very intentional and are continually practiced, and sometimes you don't do great. Those are things that will improve your ability to be effective in business, be effective in communication, make more money. If you need a why, we'll bring it back to a story. You have to utilize those tools at your discretion, and that's going to ultimately help you long term become a better human. Yes. And don't talk all the time. There's some great things. The very last one, I love how it's like, don't talk all the time.
Right. Yeah. So you pulled in point number 6, which is use volume to your advantage, which is speaking softer, but also speaking potentially a little louder, right? Instead of banging the same key all the time. Don't shout, but raise your voice with passion. Use silence
when it's necessary.
Right. Use silence, right? That uncomfortable silent pause. But again, it allows brains to catch up, both for the speaker and for the listener. Repeat yourself, which is always interesting when you do that a couple times. I always like to start and end like sessions you try to create a statement up front, and then you try to make sure you reinforce it at the end. It's not repeat, just to kind of close the loop. It's not necessarily the repeat yourself over and over, but yeah, there's some great tips in here for anybody who really wants to think about better ways to present and to get the people you're talking to listen to you.
Again, even of those of us that speak all the time, like you can always improve, you can always do better, and this is very much a practiced and behavioral thing that leads to habits. So it becomes very difficult to do if you're not intentional all the time.
Yeah, we try to do that every week. we try our best. Tyler, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.